This map shows an expansion of territory that defies logic. By the year 1258, in a single generation, the Mongol Empire had swept from China, across Asia, and directly to the borders of the Middle East and Europe. This anatomical diagram of the eye represents the highly advanced scientific knowledge that was systematically targeted when the Mongols reached Baghdad. In a single week, the greatest city in the world fell. The House of Wisdom was destroyed, libraries were burned, and 500 years of accumulated Islamic scholarship was entirely wiped out. This expansion ran on a core military doctrine of psychological terror. Before their armies even arrived, the Mongols would send an ultimatum: surrender, or every man, woman, and child will be killed. That message was a weapon just as lethal as their cavalry. That terror was engineered directly into their physical presence on the battlefield. The ornate dragon motifs on their conical helmets were designed specifically to intimidate, reinforcing the myth that fighting them was fighting an unstoppable force of nature. By 1260, they had destroyed Baghdad, sacked Aleppo, and taken Damascus. Only a geopolitical vacuum remained, leaving Hulagu Khan's Ilkhanate to set their sights on Egypt, the very last major Muslim power standing. If the Mongols breached Egypt, there was nowhere left to retreat. The remaining continuity of Islamic civilization, scholarship, and culture would be permanently extinguished. Standing in their way were the Mamluks. Their name translates to owned in Arabic, pointing to a severe historical paradox. They were enslaved boys taken from the Central Asian steppes, brought to Egypt, converted to Islam, and trained from childhood exclusively to fight. Deprived of tribal loyalties, they evolved into an elite brotherhood. A fully equipped Mamluk cavalryman, riding a barded horse, protected by its own armor, and wearing dense chainmail, represented a new class of heavy military sophistication. By 1260, they had taken power in Egypt, led by Sultan Qutuz. For Qutuz, the looming war was deeply personal. He had been captured and enslaved as a young boy after the Mongols destroyed his own homeland. When Hulagu's envoys arrived in Cairo, demanding absolute surrender, Qutuz refused. He had the envoys executed and their heads prominently displayed on the city gates. Qutuz used this execution as a calculated strategic strike against the Mongol doctrine of psychological terror. This signaled to his own forces that the path of surrender had been permanently closed. Standing before his commanders, Qutuz transformed the coming conflict into a unified effort for the survival of Islam, focusing his soldiers on a cause far larger than the defense of Egyptian territory. To meet the Mongols before they reached Egypt, the Mamluk army marched north along the coast, directly toward the Crusader fortress of Acre. The Crusaders faced a sharp dilemma: ally with the approaching Mongols, or allow the Mamluk army safe passage. The Crusaders engaged in an extraordinary piece of geopolitical pragmatism. They calculated that the Mongols posed the greater threat to their own existence. Choosing strict neutrality, they allowed the Mamluk forces safe passage to march and purchase essential supplies. On the 3rd of September 1260, the two armies met in the Jezreel Valley of Palestine. The site was called Ain Jalut, the Spring of Goliath. The Mamluk vanguard was commanded by Baibars, a tactical genius who intended to use the Mongols' own momentum against them. His objective was a maneuver known as a feigned retreat. It requires absolute discipline to run away convincingly without devolving into an actual chaotic rout. This tactical map illustrates the maneuver. A vanguard pulls backward into a valley, drawing the aggressive enemy forward. Maintaining cohesion, their retreat pulled the Mongols deep into the valley, springing a trap as the concealed Mamluk army emerged, holding the high ground. Even surrounded, the Mongols fought uphill for hours. When the Mamluk left flank began to buckle under the pressure, Sultan Qutuz personally rode into the melee. He tore off his helmet so his men could recognize him, shouting out as he charged the front line. The left flank held. The Mongol commander, Kitbuka, was captured and executed. Their lines finally collapsed, and for the first time in history, the myth of Mongol invincibility shattered in open combat. History, however, rarely provides clean endings. On the march back to Egypt, Baibars assassinated Sultan Qutuz to seize the throne for himself. Despite his violent ascension, Baibars proved to be a highly effective ruler. He immediately swept north, pushing the Mongols back across the Euphrates and establishing a permanently defensible frontier for the region. Securing that frontier had an immediate cultural consequence. The scholars who had survived the destruction of Baghdad, carrying the few manuscripts they managed to salvage, finally had a safe destination. Cairo effectively replaced Baghdad as the undisputed intellectual center of the world. Institutions like Al-Azhar University absorbed this influx of knowledge, anchoring a renewed era of Islamic learning and trade. Ain Jalut proves that momentum does not determine the future. By standing firm against an empire built on terror, the Mamluks preserved the continuity of an entire civilization.